Robert Thurman wrote, "Wisdom is the bliss of seeing through the delusion of self-preoccupation to reveal the underlying dimension of freedom. Compassion is the expression of such bliss to others." So bliss is the wisdom is the bliss of seeing through the delusion of self-preoccupation to reveal the underlying dimension of freedom. Compassion is the expression of such bliss to others. I'm focusing today on the great help that Zazen provides in broadening our perspective beyond the confinement of self-preoccupation. Some of you know this, but when I visit my mother on the weekends, I stay out at our country place, and I get up at dawn on the two mornings that I'm there, and outfit myself head to toe in mosquito netting so ticks don't get me. And I get out among the trees, and I work for a couple of hours on those 2 mornings. There's either the vines, the grapevines that are kind of strangling the trees. They can be this big, really, really big, and break the branches of the trees. So I cut those and then nip the buds over and over and over hundreds, thousands of times. And or I cut the Yupon holly, which is a native plant, but when it doesn't have anything to control it, it takes over, and then there's nobody there. The other plants don't have room to grow. So I've been doing that this summer. My project has been centered on the holly, because I'm trying to protect the trees from my brother-in-law's tractor. He mows around them and will often scrape the trunks. And I realized if those trunks get scraped every year with every mowing, it can't be good. It weakens the trees and disease can get in. So I've decided I'll do that, clear each trunk, which is an impossible task. And he can stay 5 feet in circumference around the trees with his tractor. And it's been a wonderful process. I've found all kinds of plants that I didn't know grew in such numbers under these trees. I'm always happy to see the gumbulia. I don't know if you've ever heard of the gumbully tree. It's a Texas native tree. It makes these nice white flowers at one time of year, and then these nice berries once the flowers go to fruit, and the birds love them. I always love the Texas persimmons. They also have nice flowers and berries, and they have a gray trunk, a smooth gray trunk. I love those trees. But I also find mulberry and Brazilian bluewood, which I hadn't even known we had when I was growing up there for some of my childhood. And even smaller plants like yellow sidebeak pencil flower, which is a nice name for a flower. And blue flower and chicory. This year was the first time I realized we had chicory out there. Beautiful blue, sky blue color, and scarlet sage. So kneeling at the feet of these giant oaks, searching out the roots of the holly, I'm very close. Paradoxically, in that closeness, I broaden my view. I'm in a different sphere, and under the canopy of the trees where the other creatures reign, I'm like a little ant crawling around, doing my thing at the foot of these trees. Now, as I build this vision for you, I wonder if anyone noticed my characterization of my brother-in-law as the villain of the piece. In my broadened view, I can see all these plants, even the smallest ones that host these tiny bees and these little hoverflies. But I close off to Jeff's view. I've spent a lot of time in Zazen noticing my mind circling back around to our contesting visions of how to care for the land. Sitting in Zazen week after week, I soften the bounds of my certainty in my own point of view, my certainty about what's real, and look into what his view might be. I can see his great sense of responsibility to do the maintenance on the land. I can acknowledge his time and dedication and attention to it. And I can see that from his point of view up on that tractor, mowing among the trees, he can see the results of his labor and see that the undergrowth is cleared and everything has this park-like quality. And he, would be proud of that. So a broadened view in this respect takes persistence in returning again and again with the question, am I sure I'm right about this? And a lot of times I say, yes, definitely right. But that shouldn't close off other views. If my view closes off other views, it's not right. There's a problem. So it's only then that I can take include Jeff as one of the vital elements of caretaking this land. I have to let go of my own preoccupation with being right so I can leave room for Jeff's view. Like Jeff and I, societies all over the world right now are feeling these divisions, ideologies that are produced and reproduced again and again in movies and commercials and all different kinds of media that is a segregated media so that we don't hear each other's information. They reinforce the citizens' visions of the other as stubborn and benighted. They just don't know what they're talking about. So in these times, we can look to our practice and find healing and peace. We don't often think of Zazen as a ritual, but it's good to entertain the concept that Zazen is a ritual. Taigen Dan Layton says Zazen is a ritual enactment of awakening. We sit in the position of the Buddha and we experience awakened mind day after day when we have a regular Zazen practice. Paula Arai wrote a book called Bringing Zen Home, The Healing Heart of Japanese Women's Rituals, in which she reflects on her interviews with Soto Zen lay women. In this field work she did, Arai learned a great deal about the power of ritual for helping us expand our perspective from our tight sense of being alone in facing our troubles to a welcoming of universal support. She writes, the healing way involves discipline, ritualized practices, and expanding perspectives. Expanding perspectives transform relationships with events and people. So that's an interesting idea that we're thinking we're all alone, we're in this ritual, and we feel that our perspectives are transformed so that we feel a different relationship, a broader relationship with events and people. One of Arai's study subjects told her how the various rituals that took her through the death of her parents helped her accept their deaths and accept the inevitability of her own death. Ao Yamaroshi describes this process. When a person moves her body and does these rituals in a heartfelt way, then the sadness is expressed and one does not sink. In this way, the sadness transforms into a different strength. Healing occurs when we have a bodily, heartfelt awareness that we're integral to an all-encompassing network in which compassionate support is both given and received. We feel that network when we're in these rituals again and again and again. When we're in these rituals, when there's been a death in our community and we go through those 7 days of the ceremony for remembering the dead, the 100th day, we have the ceremonies of our ritual practices here. Every Sunday. So all of this helps us to feel integral to this larger universe in which compassionate support is both given and received. Arai's teacher, Kito Roshi, told her, "You are in great nature. It is not that you see it, but that your heart pounds even when you sleep. You are healed." Then she said, "Let it all be as it is, birth, death. We are here now as we are because we've received the generous gift of the universe's activity. To live with gratitude is to be healed. The entire earth is medicine." So what does it mean to broaden our sense of reality? The fascicle I'm addressing today is called Hakujushi, the Cypress Tree. And some people translate it, a lot of the different commentaries will call it an oak tree, but this particular one calls it a cypress tree. So this fascicle shows that broadening of our sense of reality entails loosening our hold on the categories we try to impose on fluid reality. Reality is flowing and we try to stop it and say, this is that, this is this other thing. And it's a guaranteed failure. We can't stop reality. And so when we try to do that, we suffer. When we try to stop reality and fix it, we're deluded and we suffer. So as our practice of Zazen grows and deepens, we get a different idea of what's included in reality. Dogen Zenji explores 3 koans in this fascicle, all featuring Jiaozhou. So Jiaozhou lived from 778 to 897, supposedly. So I think it's like 118 is what it says that he lived till. He lived in northern China during the Tang Dynasty. And just to orient ourselves about what else was going on in the world during that time, it was when in Europe, Charlemagne was being crowned as the first Holy Roman Emperor. And in Persia, the polymath Jabir ibn Hayyan was discovering the world-altering science of chemistry. And when an Anglo-Saxon poet was imagining a hero named Beowulf swimming down into the dark water to find the monstrous mother of Grendel. So on these, to think about, to encapsulate these 3 koans, I've given them a little title just to help us see what I see in them anyway. The first one, I'm saying the student turns the tables on the teacher. So the first koan, the young Jiaozhou, at something like 18 years old, enters the temple of the Reverend teacher Nanchuan. And he finds Nanchuan reclining in his room, which is a very odd position for a teacher to be in to receive a student, to be lying down. Jiaozhou responds to this strange situation by telling Nanchuan that he came from a temple called Auspicious Image Monastery. When Nanchuan tests him by asking him what auspicious image is there in his home temple, Jiaozhou parries by mentioning a reclining Tathagata. And the word Tathagata is one of the epithets of the Buddha. So he's seeing the teacher reclining and he's saying the reclining Buddha. That makes Nanchuan sit up. When Nanchuan asks whether Jiaozhou is a novice with a teacher, Jiaozhou makes another unexpected response, saying, "It is still cold in early spring. I bow to you, wish you an auspicious life." Every year, Zen disciples write to their teachers, praying for their continued good health and asking them to continue teaching for another year. So Jiaozhou thus initiates the teacher-student relationship when he says that to Nanchuan. In this koan, both teacher and student answer questions by leaping beyond the expected boundaries of possible answers. Now, the second koan. This one I've titled Teacher Broadens students schema. Has a little too many S sounds. So I think people might know this, but just to bring it out is a schema, just to define what a schema is. It describes a pattern of thought or behavior that organizes categories of information and the relationships among them. It can also be described as a mental structure of preconceived ideas, a framework representing some aspects of the world, or a system of organizing and perceiving new information. So if you think about agriculture, just as a random example, you would have different categories within that field of knowledge, farm equipment, livestock, the workers, I don't know, the seeds or something like that. And any new information that came to you, you would put it in one of those categories, and you wouldn't have to think too hard because it makes it simple to have a schema like that. And so the idea is that schemata, these little categories, influence attention, and they influence the absorption of new knowledge. People are more likely to notice things that fit into their to their schema, while reinterpreting contradictions to the schema as exceptions or distorting them to fit. Schemata have a tendency to remain unchanged even in the face of contradictory information. So teacher broadens students' schema. This koan has now Jiaozhou, a monk asking Jiaozhou, who's now a teacher in his career, the meaning of Bodhidharma coming from India. Bodhidharma is honored as the monk who brought Buddhism from India to China. And this question is very often asked by monks who are approaching a teacher in these koans. The monk is asking why someone had to bring Buddhism from India to China when Buddha Dharma is already flowing in China, as well as everywhere else in all world systems. In answer to that question, Jiaozhou answers, the cypress tree in the garden. Notice how he's broadening this monk's idea of reality. Reality isn't understood only through what an old Zen teacher can say. It's also accessible in what a tree shows. The monk has the courage to ask Jiaozhou, please don't use an object to guide me. He wants a straight answer. When Jiaozhou insists that he isn't using an object, he gives a big hint. The tree isn't an object. The tree is a subject. It has its own Dharma position. Dogen loves this answer. He asks his own students, is it not receiving boundlessness and sending back an echo? Dogen is referring to the boundlessness of reality, not to be contained by particular people performing particular actions like Bodhidharma bringing Buddhism to China from India. He's also celebrating Jiaozhou's way. Dogen is also celebrating Jiaozhou's way of working with his student, meeting the boundlessness implied in the monk's question with the echo of Jiaozhou pointing to something just outside the walls of the temple, the cypress tree. In his commentaries on koans, Dogen often quoted phrases. So whenever I'm doing this, I'll use air quotes so that you can see when Dogen is using quotations. He writes, so this is Dogen's commentary on this koan. Because vast spirit has no contradiction, the cypress tree in the garden. Okay, I can see it. I don't know if my hands were far enough. He next uses a sort of syllogistic logic, moving from one claim to its logical consequence. The cypress tree is not in an old shrine. As it is not in an old shrine, it is totally immersed. As it is totally immersed, I have endeavored. Because I have endeavored, I am not using an object. In this logical sequence, Dogen says the cypress tree isn't marked as a sacred site like an old shrine would be. Because it isn't, it's totally immersed in the flow of reality. Next, he points to the endeavor of students of the way to broaden their perspective so as to recognize suchness. He ends the sequence by announcing a conclusion. Then, with what does Jiaozhou teach? I am like this. Jiaozhou teaches with his present self and its circumstances, its environment. The third koan, come on in. Their chairs back over in the side window, and welcome. The third koan that he brings into this fascicle, I'm titling Breaking Through the Categories of Space and Time. This is one in which the monk asked Jiaozhou whether the cypress tree has Buddha nature. And by the way, Jiaozhou is the one who answered both yes and no when different people asked him if a dog has Buddha nature. So he's really ready for this, this question. So here, though, Jiaozhou answers with a clear yes. The monk's question relates to a question Dogen himself finds compelling throughout his life, whether when we practice, we cultivate ourselves through practice so we can clear away the dust of the afflictions, or whether we suddenly discover our Buddha nature. The monk asks, when does the cypress tree become a Buddha? The temporal frame, signaled by the word when, that the monk is imposing on the cypress tree is a bit of a test. Surely there's no time stamp for Buddha nature, no before or after. Jiaozhou answers, when the sky falls to the ground. That prospect would give one pause, I would think. The sky isn't an object that can fall. To name such an event is to hold up a puzzle that the monk must solve. There is no when for such an action as the empty sky falling to the solid ground. The monk seems to miss the cue and asks, when is that? Jiaozhou answers, when the cypress tree becomes Buddha. So he's just not giving an inch. You're going to have to figure this out on your own. I ask, when would that be? It's beginningless and endless. It's always present. The Mumonkan commentary proclaims, the oak tree there in the garden. With this answer, he presented the world of oneness, which is nothing but the whole universe. Okay, so we have these three koans that Dogen Zenji brings together in this fascicle. The young Jiaozhou meeting Nanchuan, both of them using unexpected answers to break out of fixed categories of teacher and student. Jiaozhou as a teacher teaching his student the breadth of the Buddha Dharma, its boundlessness infusing even the seemingly non-holy and insentient cypress tree. And the third, Jiaozhou's affirmation that the cypress tree, and by implication everything else, has Buddha nature. What does Dogen do with these three koans? And why does he weave them together for us? Is my next question. And the title I gave, the next part of my talk, my response to this fascicle is Discern Through Zazen and Do It in Sangha. Dogen quotes Jiaozhou as telling his students, if you want to realize the single great matter, clarify what is essential through Zazen. Dogen responds, indeed, endeavor in Zazen is a straight path of the Buddha way. Clarify the principle through sitting and seeing. After giving his monks a variety of questions to ask, demonstrating the extent of the investigation into the Buddha Dharma he's asking them to pursue, Dogen himself goes back in time by about 345 years to present Jiaozhou with a question. He says, "Let me ask old man Jiaozhou, if you are one of the withered cypress trees sprouting from one root, what do you do?" Here, Dogen points to the root that is the ancestral heritage that Zen claims from teacher to student, investigating the Dharma together. The topic of Vicky's talk last week, the whole Zen lineage that we know people have learned from each other. That's how we learn our practice and put our practice into action, is talking together, practicing together, sitting together. When I was in Japan studying at Toshoji, Docho Roshi, who's the abbot of the monastery, and Hoitsu Roshi, who's what's called the Seido Roshi, the person who's above Docho Roshi, the visiting elder monk. Hoitsu Roshi, by the way, is the son of Shunryu Suzuki Roshi. Mm-hmm. So Hoitsu Roshi was visiting us, and Docho Roshi took some of the monks on a trip to a nearby castle, whose family was the first benefactors of the temple, the monastery. And as we were walking up to it, we walked through an avenue of massive cypress trees. And when we got to the end of that avenue, one of them was marked by one of those round, like showing the rings of the cypress tree. Can't think of the word that I'm trying to recall. And it would say, this happened at this time in Japanese history, this happened at the next time, all that, showing the rings and that sort of thing. It was a 700-year-old cypress tree. Docho Roshi reached out his hands and put his hands on the tree. And it was just such a lovely gesture of wonder and awe. You could really feel, it was like a Buddha meeting a Buddha. It really felt like he was responding to the long life of this cypress tree. I tried in those months in the monastery to find all the places. This is my goal, was to find every single place in the Shobo Genzo where Dogen talks about the insentient world, rocks, trees, tiles, and pebbles, expounding the Dharma or preaching the Dharma. And I thought maybe there would just be, a handful of them that I could then put together and understand. But I realized I don't think, it would be hard to come up with a complete list, because he does it all the time. Almost every time he's writing about anything, he's talking about so-called insentient objects, which are actually sentient, expounding the Dharma. The world around us, in other words, expounds the Dharma, shows us reality. So he really felt it. Buddha nature isn't so limited as to be confined to human beings or to beings who have a consciousness like human beings. Jiaozhou's cypress tree might have been as massive as that tree Docho Roshi reached out to touch, but even a seedling would carry the same dignity and vitality. We study works like this to look into the ways teachers and students of the past have opened up perspectives of reality. This opening is facilitated by a devoted and deep Zazen practice, nurtured by an active engagement in Sangha life, where we work together and talk together, using all the manifold reality around us to express and experience our understanding of the Buddha Dharma. So I'll end with this poem by Jane Hirschfield that I learned in Constance's first poetry class, Zen poetry class. And it gives us a sense of the kind of broad vision we need to be of help to ourselves and our planet. And it's titled Tree. It is foolish to let a young redwood grow next to a house. Even in this one lifetime, you will have to choose. That great, calm being, this clutter of soup pots and books, already the first branch tips brush at the window. Softly, calmly, immensity taps at your life.